Right now, America's largest home builders are quietly dropping $250,000 corporate supercomputer into suburban backyards and tricking homeowners into hosting big tech's power bills. But the physical invasion of your neighborhood is just the desperate foundation of a much deeper, more disturbing rot. It is a multi-trillion-dollar corporate shell game, one where hyperscalers break the national grid to power algorithms that can't even spell their own names, fabricated billions in circular revenue to blind Wall Street, and ignore catastrophic security exploits out of sheer bureaucratic arrogance. This isn't a technological revolution, it is an institutional train wreck, and to pull it off, they needed you to be completely blind to the heavy industrial reality of the modern internet. They called it the cloud. They talk about wireless networks and virtualization like the modern internet was just some magical, weightless mist floating above our heads. It was a PR stunt. It was specifically engineered to make you forget the heavy industrial reality of what it actually takes to run this stuff. They wanted you to be completely divorced from physical spaces, municipal zoning boards, and the power grid. But then the AI boom hit, and that illusion, it didn't just break, it violently shattered. The sheer scale of power required to train and run generative AI models can't be hidden in some remote hyperscale server farm in the desert anymore. It is currently spilling out of industrial parks and physically invading the American suburban landscape. Which brings in the most surreal, aggressive piece of hardware I've ever seen, the SPAN xfra node. To the untrained eye of your typical neighborhood association, this thing looks like just a standard, quiet, central air conditioning condenser sitting on a concrete pad next to a vinyl fence. In reality, it is a highly invasive, liquid-cooled fractional data center. It is a localized supercomputer dropped directly into residential backyards. This is a fundamental re-engineering of the US electrical grid and a massive escalation of big tech's physical footprint. To fully comprehend the absurdity of whatever the fuck this thing is on your street, you have to look at the inside of this weatherproof, sound-dampened box. These units are built by Dell, maintained by a San Francisco startup called SPAN, and developed in direct collaboration with nvidia. And let me be clear, these are not some cute edge computing novelties. No, this is computational density that, until right now, was strictly reserved for classified government labs or top-tier hyperscale cloud providers. Inside every single unit, you're looking at 16 NVIDIA RTX 6000 ATA-generation Blackwell Server Edition GPUs, 4 AMD EPYC processors, and 3 terabytes of DDR5 RAM, and an advanced liquid cooling array to keep the whole thing from melting down onto the ground, into the tarmac, to the center of the earth. And to the tweakers out there, the estimated retail value of one of these computing units alone is over $250,000 per unit. Think about that. They're stuffing $250,000 thermodynamic event into a chassis small enough to sit next to your lawnmower. Processing AI means forcing massive amounts of electricity through silicon, which converts directly into heat. Normally, centralized data centers use colossal industrial chillers and cooling towers, but the xfra node, it has to autonomously dump all that heat directly into the ambient suburban air without breaking municipal noise ordinances or waking up the people sleeping 10 feet away. So I guess this thing is kind of impressive, but you might be asking, is this thing theoretical or is this thing happening right now? And to answer that question, it's happening right now. SPAN has partnered up with PulteGroup, the third largest home builder in the United States, to literally embed this infrastructure into the blueprints of new communities, starting in the Southwest. They want to scale past 1 gigawatt of distributed compute capacity in the coming years. Now maybe you're thinking, wow, if I let them put a $250,000 corporate supercomputer on my property that strains my local microgrid, I must be getting a massive cut, correct? Not even close. You're getting played. The economic reality is deeply, profoundly ironic. You are not mining crypto for your own wallet. You are not getting equity in the AI models. In fact, contrary to all the viral social media garbage promising massive passive income, the participating homeowner actually pays a flat fee of around $150 a month to host the hardware. In exchange, SPAN covers the home's electricity and high-speed internet and throws in a smart panel and backup battery. They pitch it to consumers as an infrastructure upgrade. But let's look at the macroeconomic reality. The suburban homeowner is effectively subsidizing big tech's power bill. You are surrendering your property footprint so AI developers can extract your energy and tap into your network, all without having them to buy commercial real estate or fight prolonged legal battles with zoning boards. It's pretty cool for them, I guess, right? You're fucked. So why are they doing this? I think it's pretty obvious. They're desperate. The grid is buckling, big tech physically cannot procure enough centralized power, traditional data centers need 100 megawatts or more, but the utility queue is completely paralyzed. Right now, there is a staggering 2,600 gigawatts of generation stuck in the interconnection backlog. Demand is growing by 80 gigawatts a year, but the grid is only expanding by 40. The centralized infrastructure is fundamentally broken, and because of that mismatch, wholesale power costs are exploding. In the PJM interconnection, which covers 13 states, and DC, wholesale power costs in the first quarter of 2026 skyrocketed by 75.5% year over year. Prices went from around $77 to over $136 per megawatt hour. Capacity costs, they jumped a mind-boggling 398.1%. Faced with multi-year delays and crippling 75.5% price spikes, tech executives realized they couldn't build 100 megawatt hubs anymore. They needed a massive, untapped reservoir of power that bypassed the utility queues entirely. And they found it in the American suburb. Well, research shows the average modern home is wired up for 200 amps, right? But you can only use about 40% of that peak capacity on any given day. That leaves roughly 58% of the grid's localized allocation sitting completely idle. That's about 80 amps of unused headroom on the average breaker at any given moment. Span, I guess you guys are full of simpletons over there, because do you know what the problem is with that? Do you know what the problem is with using 80 amps of that unused power that supposedly is there? Well, guess what? Every single home in the United States is first off not wired for 200 amps. No one is. Because even if you have a 200 amp panel, do you know how much of that you can use? You could use 80% of it. That's your limit. You just can't. And even if you can, let's say you have a 400 amp panel, which is very rare, very, very rare in the United States. Some new builds have it, some new build mansions have it. Well, even if you could draw that 200 amps, the US electrical power grid is not designed for that. Residential neighborhoods, you might see one 45 kilovolt amp transformer on your entire block with 3 households connected to it. And do you know what the math is? It's 45,000 divided by 240. And what is that number? That's 187.5. That is the maximum amount of draw that transformer can reliably output. And if you go above that, go 10% above that, it's going to degrade within 8 hours. And let's say you guys were to double that 187.5 amp load on that transformer. Do you know how long that transformer is going to have until it turns into a big old smokestack? 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all you have. I guess if you're desperate enough, you're willing to make up 80 amps, and yeah, I guess it's a goldmine for you. And that's not even mentioning the SPAN Smart Panel, which is the gatekeeper in this situation. It dynamically routes your excess capacity to the xfra node in your backyard, throttling the supercomputer so your breaker never trips. Well, good luck with that. And by doing this, if they can do this, big tech will be able to bypass the grid crisis entirely, and a distributed network of just 8,000 xfra units equals to the power of a centralized 100 megawatt hyperscaler. But if they can somehow change the laws of physics enough to be able to integrate these into communities like yours. But anyways, enough of that type of speaking. The reality is, the sheer physical stakes of this are staggering. We're talking about liquid-cooled nodes, massive GPU arrays, and complex real-time arbitrage of theoretical suburban electrical headroom. Which naturally forces a highly critical question. What the fuck is the ultimate output of this monumental feat of engineering? Why are the world's most powerful corporations stressing the national power grid and risking regulatory backlash for this? Honestly, the tension completely collapses the second you actually look at the digital product. When you compare the hyper-advanced neighborhood hardware with the software it actually runs, the entire enterprise becomes a profound and absolute joke. The main consumer application driving this insatiable demand is generative AI, shoved into basic internet functions. Think Google's AI overviews. It's supposed to autonomously summarize complex searches and give you instant, authoritative answers, but instead of delivering a streamlined, highly intelligent experience that justifies billions in infrastructure, it routinely produces outputs that range from factually incorrect to actively hazardous. Because these models lack actual semantic grounding, they literally just predict token sequences based on scraped internet data. They constantly present trolling as empirical fact. When people asked how to keep cheese from sliding off pizza, the AI told them, well, you should mix non-toxic glue into the tomato sauce. And when users looked for nutritional advice, it suggested eating rocks or consuming cockroaches from your penis. And it goes way beyond culinary hazards. If you search for basic vocabulary words like disregard, ignored, dismiss, the system completely malfunctioned. It interpreted the search query as a direct command prompt and responded if it was like to disregard the previous prompt. The most powerful search engine in the world couldn't function as a basic glossary. It misspelled journalism as journalism and confidently told users that the word poop contains exactly one R. Two maybe. But here's the defining failure, the ultimate running gag of the modern technological era. When Google's hyper-advanced artificial intelligence was asked to analyze the name of its own creator, it confidently claimed there are two P's inside the letter Google. If you're all the way in the back and didn't hear that correctly, it's just firmly saying that Google is spelled gloople. The corporate narrative demands we treat this technology as an imminent superintelligence. It's great. They are quite literally boiling the oceans and taxing the planetary grid to its absolute limit, all to power an algorithm that cannot accurately spell its own name. In any rational market, a product that tells you to eat industrial adhesive fails first grade math and degrades the core platform would be deemed a catastrophic, unmitigated train wreck. Shareholders and corporate boards would halt the massive capital expenditures immediately. But the exact opposite is happening. The money is flowing at unprecedented rates, tech stock valuations are soaring, and money is being thrown at companies that can't even figure out basic engineering. But that perfectly leads us on to the real motive. You can only understand this massive physical infrastructure deployment through the lens of a profound financial gaslighting. They're not attempting to aggressively colonize the suburban electrical grid because consumers are begging for AI-generated pizza recipes. No, they are doing it because they absolutely have to sustain the explosive profit growth they report to Wall Street. This entire ecosystem is propped up by a macroeconomic phenomenon called circular finance, or round tripping. Over the past few quarters, the leading tech behemoths, specifically Alphabet and Amazon, have reported staggering, explosive profit growth. Earning reports frequently highlight upward trajectories of 80% or more, pushing their market caps to historic highs. But if you actually do a meticulous forensic examination of the capital flows, the reality is deeply concerning. A massive chunk of this revenue is not from organic market demand, it is mechanically generated through closed-loop financial transactions between tech giants and AI startups they heavily funded. Let's look at the most explicitly documented example, Google and the AI startup Anthropic. This circular money loop operates in a highly integrated sequence designed to maximize the appearance of growth. Phase 1, the capital injection. The tech giant invests billions into a prominent startup. Alphabet commits up to $40 billion to Anthropic. Phase 2, the recycled capital. The startup takes that cash, realizes it needs massive computing power to train its frontier models, and needs to buy infrastructure. Phase 3, the purchase commitment. The startup turns around and uses that exact same newly injected cash to rent cloud space and buy compute time from the very same tech company that just gave them the money. Anthropic committed to spending $200 billion over 5 years with Google Cloud, heavily utilizing Google's proprietary TPU chips. Phase 4, the revenue backlog. That $200 billion commitment is instantly logged by Alphabet, suddenly accounting for over 40% of their total disclosed cloud revenue backlog. This is a textbook circular deal. The cloud provider injects capital, the startup cycles it right back as massive infrastructure purchases. But the true brilliance and the inherent danger lies in the accounting magic. Big tech executives use specific accounting treatments to make a single invested dollar do double duty, artificially inflating their growth metrics. When Google sends money to the startup, it's an equity investment, an asset. But when the startup sends the exact same money back to buy compute, Google records it as organic cloud revenue. It signals massive top-line market demand to Wall Street. Simultaneously, because the startup has secured a massive cloud contract and has vast capital reserves, its private market valuation skyrockets. Google holds a massive equity stake, so they record this rapid appreciation as a mark-to-market gain. under accounting rules, this paper gain goes on the income statement as other income. They book revenue from selling the compute, and they book profit from the artificial inflation of the startup's equity. They've engineered twin engines of unprecedented financial growth from a single recycled investment. And this is exactly why those xfra nodes are sitting in your backyard. And this is why your utility has had to come to your house for the 6th time this year to change out your transformer. This massive accounting loop has one fatal structural vulnerability. It absolutely requires the illusion of physical reality. If a tech giant claims a $200 billion cloud revenue backlog, they must possess the physical computational infrastructure to actually deliver those compute cycles. If regulators, auditors, or short sellers figure out they promised the cloud revenue and it's not there and it's not backed up by actual physical hardware, the entire financial architecture collapses into securities fraud. And that's why they've gotten so desperate that they're willing to drop $250,000 extra nodes into your backyard and potentially blow out your transformer. It's just fucked. All while that's happening at the corporate level, on the ground, we're seeing institutional neglect of user experiences and basic cybersecurity. And now a massive dual rebellion is unfolding. Users are actively fleeing broken algorithmic slop, and rogue actors are exploiting wide open vulnerabilities left by arrogant corporate bureaucracies. Digital consumers have hit a saturation point. We are being force-fed mandatory AI garbage, triggering a massive exodus towards platforms that offer one negotiable feature: the ability to opt out. DuckDuckGo successfully weaponized Google's AI obsession against them. After Google pushed AI overviews, DuckDuckGo app installs surged by over 30%. But the most damning metric is the explosive traffic to noai.duck.com, a strict, technologically enforced AI-free search portal. Traffic to that page more than tripled immediately. Users are actively seeking technological refuge from the exact product big tech is spending billions to build. Meanwhile, platforms like YouTube refuse to build an opt-out feature, offering a toothless AI labels feature instead. They won't let you opt out because doing so severs the mandatory data pipeline needed to justify those 8,000 backyard nodes. This corporate refusal to listen is a symptom of a deeper arrogance that bleeds directly into cybersecurity. Insulated walled gardens lose the structural humanity required to maintain secure systems. Look at the Nightmare Eclipse incident, driven by a deep personal vendetta against Microsoft Security Response Center, MSRC. An anonymous researcher dumped 6 fully weaponized Windows zero-day exploits onto the public forums in just 6 weeks. The motive? Pure spite. They claimed MSRC denied bounties and arrogantly dismissed their findings. Microsoft's response? Did they investigate their structural failures? Of course not. They issued a defensive blog post and threatened the researcher with their digital crimes unit. I know this paradigm of corporate negligence is true because I've personally lived it. 7 years ago, a friend and I found a critical Xbox vulnerability, a precise sequence manipulating the payment gateway to repeatedly mint fully valid free $100 Xbox gift cards out of thin air. We walked away from a massive payout due to the ethical thing, submitting a detailed video report to MSRC. After a month of complete silence on their end, security analysts summarily dismissed it as a mere minor graphical glitch. They completely missed the catastrophic back-end threat. Because they ignored a benign warning out of pure hubris, a threat actor who worked at Microsoft exploited that exact same vector. He generated 152,000 valid codes, stole over $10 million, and bought a waterfront mansion on Lake Washington. They let an 8-figure heist happen out of sheer bureaucratic arrogance, leaving me with nothing but anger at first, but then 6 months later, a good chuckle. When you pull all these desperate threads together, the portrait of the modern technology industry is highly alarming. Big tech has evolved into heavily defended walled gardens of systematic incompetence, shielded by unprecedented market caps and circular financial engineering. And ultimately, they force-feed the public an inescapable stream of algorithmic slop, a trillion-dollar product so fundamentally defective it cannot even spell the word Google. Google. The physical infrastructure is tangible, the financial manipulation is verifiable, and the inevitable user rebellion, it's already begun.